strategy has reached them. It's a multi-million-dollar tactic meant to sow the division between our communities. And so I think that that is also a major threat that United We Dream Action is trying to fight back against, that we're also trying to make sure that young people know what information is right, what information is intended to actually get people riled up based off of just emotion, based off of racism, based off of just their kind of initial reaction. And the bottom line is that disinformation then goes and informs politics, and then it goes and informs policies. And that's how we're seeing the through line into mass deportations and mass raids being something that is getting normalized. And we cannot allow that to get normalized in this country.
So how do you think, to jump off your statement here, how do you think Trump has made successful inroads with Latino men, in particular young Latino men? Do we feel like the Democratic Party is at some point a little bit responsible for almost like purging or pushing aside the younger base of voters, men in general? And how do we reach out to people that have so much to lose from the very same policies that they assume will not harm their immediate family members? Because this is something I've so consistently seen with people that voted for Donald Trump that know undocumented immigrants or have immediate family members that are undocumented immigrants. And they have this assumption that like, oh, it's actually someone else that will get deported and not my immediate family members, because my immediate family members are contributing to, they're contributing to the American economy in meaningful ways. So it won't come after them. And that to me, I think is a clear cut demonstration that they too have fallen victim to this propaganda, that they also believe that there is this crisis of like migrant criminals that are running amok inside of our borders.
Yeah, there are two parts to that question. The first one, like Annabelle mentioned, is targeted disinformation, right? There is a well-funded disinformation machine designed to target young Latino men in particular, right? Where they exist, where they spend time online, right? Places like this, honestly, places like Twitch, Kick, Discord, YouTube, right? And this disinformation is designed to dehumanize the people in our own communities, right? Because when you call your neighbors who have been undocumented for 3 decades criminals, when you call asylum seekers fleeing persecution and violence invaders, what you're doing is effectively dehumanizing an entire group of people that justifies dehumanizing acts on this same group of people. And we've seen it many times in the past. This is just a tactic that populists and demagogues use. And it's no different this time. But I think like the important part here is to recognize that it has to do with our information diets. If you give good people bad information, they will do bad things and they will do like make bad actions, right? I think the second part to this is actually the lack of like good economic message, right? I think a lot of young Latino men who have been radicalized out there, and I talk to my friends all the time about this, right? And a lot of working class Latino families simply don't have the time and the privilege to care deeply about democracy and the civil rights of their neighbors. They're too busy putting food on the table, right? So unfortunately, people don't eat democracy. And so we need a compelling economic messaging to bring these people to our side, because these are people that already have been radicalized online. They're really entrepreneurial. They watch Joe Rogan all the time, right? Like we need to bring a good economic message to them, because we have to tell them, hey, like mass deportations are wrong and inhumane, but they're also fucking stupid, right? Like we will see the effects everywhere because of this mass deportation. They will see it when they go in the neighborhood and they see the local bodega shutting down. They will see when home prices keep going up because there is not enough construction workers to build more housing or enough farm workers to produce more food. They will see when their work sites get raided by ICE. They will see when their local businesses go under because they don't have enough workers and enough local customers because they're all gone because they were deported. They will see when a family member, a friend, someone they love gets deported. So this is the kind of messaging that we need to counteract the disinformation that is targeting our young Latino men.
Absolutely. What you mentioned in terms of the economic impact as well, this is one counter I hear so often, so frequently, is that like there's a cruelty, a purposeful cruelty. I'm of the mindset of Aviva Chomsky on this, that like the standard set for undocumented, or the process of documentation being limited, is a deliberate mechanism to ensure that there's always a group of second tier laborers that are constantly coming into the country that can be cycled out and discarded when they are demanding back pay or speaking out against like workplace violence and horrid conditions that they're subjected to. And this is precisely what I think the famous case of Purdue, the chicken factory that engaged in this almost human trafficking scheme of undocumented migrants in the United States of America, where they went to areas where they knew there were undocumented migrants, brought them into a trailer park right next to their factory. And when they demanded back pay after years and years of abuse, they called ICE on their own workers. And then, lo and behold, the next day they were back at it again, looking to recruit undocumented migrants to work in that same factory. This is basically, indentured servitude of a different name. And I feel like at the legislative level, there's got to be some sort of real solution to this. But one thing that I always stress is that the real way to solve this problem, which is not like it's a crisis of humanity and not necessarily people doing things that are bad or doing crimes or whatever, but instead is to process all of the undocumented migrants and offer amnesty to all citizens, conditional amnesty in terms of like, sure, like a criminal background check or whatever that Americans would be comfortable with, given the large majority or the overwhelming majority, if not damn near entirety, of the undocumented migrant population is not actually, committing any crimes whatsoever. I think that process would be fast and expedient and humane. It's also one that is genuinely popular. A lot of people, I think, get lost in the polling. I look at messaging polls all the time. I look at issue polls all the time. And one thing that I've seen so consistently is that people tend to hyper-focus on the top line and never look at the second question that follows it. And it's something as simple as this, like where in almost every single poll conducted on the matter, overwhelmingly, if given two options, mass deportation or mass amnesty, Americans overwhelmingly choose mass amnesty over mass deportation. And even in the polls where they say 60% of Americans want mass deportations, one, many Americans don't even understand what that would look like and how violent that would be and the economic impact of such a thing. But beyond that, those very same Americans also in that same poll show that they favor by the same numbers, if not by larger majorities, mass amnesty or conditional amnesty. So the fact that this is not talked about in that dynamic, that Americans actually are of two different minds and sometimes are completely oblivious to what they are advocating for, I think is really damaging to the public discourse when one side is not offering adequate counter messaging out of fears that the other side's message on this issue, that migrants constitute a national security threat, is far too pervasive and persuasive, and therefore there's nothing they can do but become the more moderate version of that same violence. So how do we fix that? That's my question. It's a long-winded one.
I know I'm like older than everybody here. I just do remember though the days that Reagan did like a pathway to citizenship, right? You got and so many families in my community talked about that time of, many of the workers, many people that were contributing the way he talked about it, obviously. I wish we just talk about it as human beings and being part of society, but he talked about it as around they were helping keep the economy going in the United States. And many of our immigrant neighbors still do that, right? But he talked about it in the way to have a pathway to citizenship. Then later on, Clinton didn't like a lot of things he did. But one of the things he did do was offer a pathway for mixed families to be able to have a pathway citizenship. For instance, I worked on as a law student, U.S. citizen, married to an undocumented person or somebody that's visa that expired or fell out of status, whatever it was, they were able to pay like kind of a fine and be able to, again, adjust their status in the United States than having to leave the country and all these things. But on top of that, though, he added a lot of criminalization provisions that are really creating some struggles for our families. Especially, again, these are many people that are already here, Hasan. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you they are everywhere and they're neighbors and they've been here for decades. And they've been part of our communities for such a long time. And I wish that we just acknowledge that we failed them instead of it looking at the other way, because we do have a country that's like, come on, no, come on, we need you. Why? Because Hasan, every time when I was a state representative, they would offer some sort of criminalization of my immigrant neighbors. I would add a provision saying, how about the person that employed them? And I do that intentionally because I want them to see, like, understand the many folks, and they're all pretending. Like, the restaurant owners are